It's revolution time!
Is it podcast number 7?
Yes, and 7 has a biblical reference number.
Does.
Did you know that? So this is lucky number 7.
It just dawned on me, and we just discussed what we're going to talk about.
So, this is Failing Forward, episode 7, and today we're going to talk about...
The flower in your hair.
Can't you tell... the flower in my scalp. The flower in my lack of hair?
The little daisy mom.
This is my Jesus Revolution look, woman.
I love it. You know what? If I'd known that just about, I don't know, a little bit ago,
yeah.
I could have worn a headband the whole way.
Yeah, you could have went all out on the hippie
Could
look.
have gone all out.
Well, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Here we are. All right, so literally we just decided we're going to do something different today. We are going to talk about Jesus Revolution.
Yes. Have you seen the movie?
I have.
I have too.
Have you seen it? You've seen it 3 times.
That's a good number too.
Why?
Well, Jesus was crucified and rose again in 3 days.
Yeah, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. We go on about the number 3 and the number 7. So podcast number 7. And yes, I saw that movie 3 times and I looked at it through a new lens each and every time.
Okay, well that's good. I want to hear more about that. So, there's a lot of discussion out there in the world and a lot of controversy too, and a lot of surprise from the movie.
Isn't the world all just about controversy?
I know,
Maybe they can kind of dig up on people.
Okay, so spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the movie.
Ooh.
So, if you haven't seen the movie, you may want to... Yeah, still go see it. It's grossed way like $35 million, and they never expected it to do even close to that. Which, sidebar, says that there is still a very strong demographic for Christian family movies. Just FYI.
Amen to that.
Throwing that out there.
So feel-good movies good? Yeah.
Was this a feel-good movie?
In some ways. And then in some ways it scraped those scars out.
Yeah, like I wouldn't call it a feel-good movie. Although, I will say that I thought they did a really good job. One of the things I would talk about is... Well, I wasn't there for the hippie movement, but you definitely got the vibe.
I kind of felt like I was there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So they did a good job, like getting that. Again, I'm speaking, and I wasn't there, but they did a good job of making you feel that
you were
that hippie
in the
vibe.
Movie.
Yeah,
they did a great job in making you feel part of the movie.
Yeah,
yes.
Well, feeling the atmosphere that was present, I think, is is what I'm looking for.
For sure.
Okay, so a couple things that we want to talk about in the movie. One. This is a different podcast
because
usually we talk
could
about
be like series of podcasts on this particular subject.
Yes. So a couple things. We don't have any notes. We just really decided that we were going to talk about this. I want to talk about how Jesus was portrayed in the movie. Okay. I want to talk about Lonnie Frisbee and Chalk and all those guys a little bit, like because we had some knowledge of them, but not a ton, which is probably most of the case. A lot of people don't know who Lonnie Frisbee is, so that's a good one. I also want to talk about what I felt was the best movie that I've seen that portrays very blatantly the gospel without being cheesy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, so one of my biggest, maybe we just dive into this. One of my biggest, you know me, I grew up in a straight up heathen family. I chased you into a Southern Baptist church. So my early Christian indoctrination was very... Southern Baptist, we'll just say it that way, okay? And so, so it was a 180, I guess is where I'm going from. It was a total 180 lifestyle change, and like your family was totally different than my family. What I think is interesting about the movie, what I liked about the movie, what I haven't liked about quote-unquote Christianity or Christian media, Christian art, is it's so cheesy. Like, for years, it's just been so, like, ugh.
Yeah,
like cheesy. I know you're going to disagree with this.
No, I don't necessarily disagree, but I think the funding behind putting the movie together is just extreme. Yeah. And so good-hearted people came forward to try to do that, and it just didn't come together because there was not the money that pushed it. Or that
No, that's fair.
And so putting on these big shows on screen take a fortune to produce and to produce right. And so I think now we're kind of in a world that, like, hey, people are paying attention. There's a lot of talent out there in the Christian community. Yep. That now I see as a need for more
higher quality, better
higher
production.
Quality Christian entertainment.
Yep, I agree.
Because the entertainment world is $1 billion industry, and so we are in need of Christ more and more each and every day, and that's why I think this movie really hit the nail on the head.
I think so too. And so I think it did it. And I'm going to say something kind of rude, but I don't mean it rude.
Brace yourself.
I love him. But like Kirk Cameron, I love Kirk Cameron. He does so many good things, but a lot of his stuff over the years, probably based on funding, it's just been kind of cheesy,
yeah.
Like
and
the
so Left Behind movie, was a great movie. I'd like to see that. Hey, Kirk Cameron, if you're watching this, we love you.
Yeah, hey Kirk, what's up? High five.
I mean, you're amazing.
You are, but
hey, bring that back with today's production.
There's just a different, there's a different quality of production that was brought to this movie, very much like The Chosen. If you've watched The Chosen,
learn and then we grow and we
we do better. We learn, we do better.
Grassroots in it.
I don't mean to beat him down. I'm just trying to say that like early Christian music was kind of it all sounded the same and it was produced the same and it was and so the same is true with like theatrics. And so I think the last 5 years, really, if I think about 5 years to a decade, we have come a long way in production.
I still believe with Jeremy Camp.
That's what I'm saying. Even but we look at music too. Like so, the music production, like K-Love and I'm saying the message online, like the music is much better than it used to. You go to a Christian concert. Yeah. I mean, it's not just
we went to Winter Jam and it was incredible.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So it's not just people standing out there with a acoustic guitar like it used to be. It's a big production show with all the pyrotechnics and all this. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like we've come a long way. So I say all that. I'm down a rabbit hole here. I loved the movie. Okay, first of all. I loved it because of the high quality production and the message that was true throughout the movie. Now, there's a lot of hate out there. People throwing a lot of shade on false gospel. It's not presenting, like Christ is
the Jesus Revolution is not the Bible that you should be reading.
I know. And so
open your Bible, friends. That's where the truth and the true gospel is. The Jesus Revolution was an entertainment.
That's exactly right. So Jesus Revolution was entertainment, but it was the best piece of entertainment I've seen that presented the gospel. So let me give you a good the scene where what's his name?
Greg Laurie was getting baptized.
Yes, goes in to get baptized by Lonnie Frisbee. And they talk about like the prayer. We talked about this, you and I, like, we grew up in that Baptist
the sinner's prayer.
The sinner's prayer, like where there's that whole the gospel, the Roman road to salvation, all those kind of things. I think that the salvation prayer that was represented in there, and again, there's no magical prayer represented in the Bible that there's a salvation prayer.
It's just that you believe.
It's a conceptual thing that's put together all the things necessary to be a follower of Christ. This is how that prayer looks like or feels like. Anyway, I thought they did a really good job of representing not only that, but Chuck's battle with rejecting the hippies because they were a lost generation of people that are floating around looking for love in all the wrong places, if you will. Looking for God in drugs, looking for God in music, looking for God, all these bad places, right? Yeah. And Chuck was like this old school minister that was like, hey, my doors aren't open to you. And they did a good job of representing what I believe is a central theme to the gospel, which is come to me all who are weary, right? So all who seek will find, right? Yeah. And so I think they did a good job. Now, there's 1,000 criticisms of what that movement entailed and the spin-offs and the lifestyle and the sin, and I get it. But what I'm saying is in this particular movie, they did a very good job of representing, one, the gospel, and two, the clarity of the message of Christ. Yeah. Disagree or agree?
We are all sinners. We have all fallen short.
That's right.
And that's why we are in need of a Savior. And so in no way did this film ever point to perfection or show men and women in a perfect view. Very imperfect, but it just shows you again how God can work through imperfect people. And going back to like the sinner's prayer, the Roman road, I call that like discipleship that
those
we
evangelical
learn,
roots. Yes,
we learn growing up. There's one way into heaven, and that's to believe that Jesus is the Son of Man. Like he is the Son of God, right? He came to the cross, died on the cross, rose again in 3 days. So when you believe that and you receive him and make him the Lord of your life, that is when that salvation happens. And so that going back to that pinnacle moment of Lonnie baptizing Greg Laurie in Pirates Cove, right?
Yeah.
they had that prayer, that moment, that decision. He says, are you ready to make that decision? Because that decision can't be made for you. Just because you grew up in a Christian home doesn't make you a Christian. Just because your mom and dad, you don't inherit Christianity. It's a decision that you make, and it's a decision that has to be made for all. It says you either gather or scatter. I like how Lonnie had said that kind of in that courtyard right after the satanic guy, right, was talking about his satanic religion.
Oh yeah.
Lonnie came up as kind of an
they were
college.
outside.
Was it a college or a high school environment?
They were just sitting outside talking.
They were just speaking outside. And then Lonnie got to get up. He's like, "Wow, that's a really
right on, dude, or far out, dude.
Far out, dude. Like that's really a far out look." But let me just tell you that, like, Jesus says, you either gather with me or scatter from me. You have a choice. You have a choice. It's not an inherited choice. It's not something like you inherit the color of your eyes, the color of your hair, or the hair loss of your hair.
Easy, kid. Easy.
It is a choice that you make. And so, like, that was a really, again, we didn't really talk about this, but, like, that was the kind of a pinnacle moment, I believe, in that movie of that decision of, like, stepping toward and finding out and being open to the idea. Greg being open to the idea of, is there a truth out there? You know, I wouldn't necessarily call myself a follower of Christ at that point, like in this movie. But I certainly don't want to like scatter from that. I want to know more. And so you either gather or you scatter, and you have that choice.
Yeah, and I probably should have started out with this. So the premise of Jesus Revolution, obviously there was a big movement. They called it the Jesus Revolution, made it on Time magazine back in the late 60s, early 70s. And it all sprung out of this area in California. And there were some central players in that movement, Lonnie Frisbee being one of them. What's Chuck's last name? Chuck Smith and Greg Laurie. Greg Laurie is the only one that's still alive. So actually the movie centers around his kind of version of this, of telling of the events as through his lens, if you will. And so Greg's still alive. He's got a Harvest Church out in California, massive church, and have had a lot of evangelical movements and cool stuff going on out there. Lonnie Frisbee was also a key player in the Vineyard movement. Him and Chuck Wimber, I think what that dude's name was, started Vineyard Church or had at least a role in that. And then Chuck Smith has had Calvary Baptist. Did I say Calvary for Greg Laurie? Because it's Harvest. Harvest. I said it right. Yeah. And then Calvary Chapel is Chuck Smith. Anyway, those three were kind of what the movie surrounds. Yeah. And the story of Greg Laurie and how he went from this lost drug-using hippie teenager to encountering Lonnie, to encountering Chuck, to it just spreads out and ends up with Greg ends up in his life becoming a pastor and pastoring his own church, and that church is one of the biggest in the United States. So that's kind of in the nutshell. Lonnie and Chuck split, and Lonnie went off and did his own thing because Lonnie had some. There's a lot of the controversy around this movie, or the people in this movie, are around Lonnie. Let's be honest, because Greg I think he's been out of trouble. Has like 50 years in ministry. There's never been any real controversy around him. Chuck had a couple crazy things, but Lonnie was the real controversial person because he did a lot of things that people don't understand, and his lifestyle didn't necessarily match his calling and his gifting. And it was crazy because God clearly did all these wild things with Lonnie, through Lonnie, but then Lonnie struggled his whole life with his own demons and his own flesh.
Well, you say lifestyle, but I think again on his deathbed he talked about it not being a lifestyle. It was choices that he made that he's paying the price for, because
they didn't dive into that in the movie. They kept it. They really just, the whole movie is the premise of like a 1.5 year timeline of when the three of them were together, and then. So you kind of learn more about it. So sorry, we're kind of running off the rails there. But the movie itself. So we sat around. We took the kiddos to the movie. We all watched the movie. All liked the movie. And we sat around. We talked about at the table, what do we like? What do we didn't like about the movie? What did you watched it 3 times. Mm-hmm. What's something that stood out to you in that movie that you really liked?
It was when Lonnie and Chuck were sitting there at the table at the very first conversation. And, I won't be able to do that scene justice. But basically... Lonnie was saying to Chuck, the pastor, like, hey, the hippies don't feel welcome at your church. It kind of goes back to, he said, they're looking for the truth. They're looking for all these things.
They're looking for God. They're just looking for him in all these things.
They're
and
looking
places.
for, they're doing the drugs. They're doing the people. They're doing all of the things. They're loving on each other. They're looking for people to tell them the way. And don't be mistaken that the one thing that they're looking for is God. They just don't know. They don't have that label for it. They don't know who God is. And they're just they're looking for God without knowing it's God.
Well, and back then, there was this real big push on psychedelic drugs. And so,
Yeah.
like LSD, for an example, or acid.
It just being able to see things differently.
Correct. And so they would talk about that openly, like looking for God through mind enhancement.
Yes.
So altering of your mind through these psychedelic drugs.
A lot of that going on today, minus the LSD, with just self-help and looking into yourself.
Yeah, so that's where I was trying to lead you to this.
Yeah,
if you already
so-
jumped there. Like, there's a lot of parallels
Yes.
with the 60s to modern day America.
So I sat at that table that night after the movie, and you said, what's the one thing that stood out to you? That scene, and I said, that is our world today. That's our world today. Like, I feel like, yes, they did a great job of bringing me into the 70s, per se, that movement, but I feel like that's a world that we live
easily
in
related
today because
we're
people
there.
are looking for love in all the wrong places.
Looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yes. So, I mean, we are, a society that are looking for answers, but we're finding our answers in the wrong places. That's leaving us even more depleted than if we would to look for the way, the truth, the life in Christ, our Savior. And so I think it's very, very parallel to today's world that I look at the hurt generation of the young people coming up and all the things that are literally coming at them as demonic evangelists, I think dark evangelists that are coming after their innocence. They're coming after their identity. They're coming after so many things that make them think that
it's a war on their mind.
It's a war on their mind, and they're going to find the answer here. But what happens is they go here, identify as this, or put their trust in this, and it's even more depleted. Like, they're here, they've done this to think that they're going to get ahead, and then they feel here. And so it's a world of hurt, and that we're looking for answers in all the wrong places. So going back to that table conversation, not just with us, the most impactful one was in the Jesus Revolution when Alani and Chuck were sitting down and having that conversation of like, hey, these kids are looking for answers. What an answer to prayer for us as a Christian community to be able to say, we have the answer. Don't be disgusted by it. They're searching. So what can we do to provide answers to the people that are searching by not closing the door?
I agree with that. That was a really good, powerful moment. For me, it was the moment where Chuck's congregation, the two scenes went hand in hand. So his wife had said some words to her, which I'm going to come back to that. But I don't remember if it was before or after this, but Chuck's congregation, the existing congregation was having problems with the new people coming in, the hippies and whatnot. Yeah. And one of the comments was about the carpet. They're barefooted and making the dirt.
We should worry about saving the carpet.
Yeah. And so the next day they come back and there's a line. And what's that line find? It's Chuck's on his knees washing feet, just like Jesus did with his disciples. And washing the feet of those people coming into the church. I thought that was a really powerful scene. And the emotional impact of what was being said without saying it, it was really powerful there. I also right before or after that was the scene where she being Chuck's wife, said what, and I always butcher this, so say it right for me. That the lies are always loud and the truth is always spoken quietly.
Yeah, so
something
the lies
like
are
that.
always loud, but the truth is always quiet.
And both of those scenes were pretty close together, and it really impacted me. I thought that's so true, especially in the world of social media. It's like you get 100 people loving on you, and you get the one person that's talking trash, and that one person is the one that's the loudest. It's the truth that's so quiet, and those lies that they're spewing at you are the loudest ones. Yeah. That's so indicative of the world we live in, especially compounded with social media. So for sure, that one stuck out with me. What about, we didn't talk a ton about this because we got sidetracked, but what did you not like about the movie?
It's a really good question. I don't know. I honestly, I will be honest with you, when they were going to Pirates Cove and doing the baptizing at first, before Lonnie pray with Greg, I was a little nervous. Like, I wanted to, the Baptist in me, you make a decision for Christ before you are baptized. Baptism does not save you.
Baptism is like a lightning bolt issue. So, like,
baptism
baptism and baptism of the Spirit, those are two, like, very controversial,
So baptism
divisive.
is an outward reflection of an inside change. And so I don't know that I have anything per se that I didn't like, but that was kind of like this moment of like, oh God, please let them do this right. In the sense of like, let Greg make a public, verbalized decision for Christ before he's baptized, because I don't want that to be misconstrued. And so I don't know that there's anything that I didn't like. I'll have to think on that for a second.
Well, I'll give you mine.
Because
mine's kind of a peripheral one that you may not have caught as much. What I didn't like was how they characterized the dad. So remember the dad?
The daughter's dad.
The daughter's dad
Kathy's
dad, went from being this staunch anti-Greg, totally like he was just a jerk, really, to Kathy really saying, hey, I want you to be a part of this. Please come. And
Greg didn't have anything to offer Kathy.
No, I understand.
They came from a wealthy, you could tell, they never said it, but it looked like the dad did well.
Yeah, they lived on a beach. I mean,
and here's Greg coming to pick up his girlfriend, Kathy, on a bike.
Well, here's where I'm going with it. I didn't have a problem with that. What I had a problem with, I felt like they rushed it together. So, like, it went from this he was so standoffish, and they didn't really develop the why of it so much. Yeah. And then the next thing you know, towards the end of the movie, he's going to be with Kathy in church. And I was like, because as an adult, I mean, first of all, let me back up. Like, I believe it's the Holy Spirit that convicts your heart. So that absolutely could have happened exactly that way. So I'm not trying to say that it isn't. I didn't think that there was a lot of development in between so that we understood what really moved her dad from being so staunchly anti-Greg, anti-God. He was really kind of a jerk.
I think, let me tell you my 2 cents on that, why he changed his perception and then maybe showed up at Calvary Chapel is because he saw the change within his daughter, because she was very dismissive towards her parents for a long time. Yeah. And then her heart kind of changed toward her parents. And then Greg coming around and being not just respectful, but Greg had this dream in his heart. He was a driven guy. And I think Kathy's dad, if you haven't seen the movie, then I'm sorry. But Kathy's dad was very dismissive of him because I believe he thought he has nothing going for him. He's got no financial, nothing about him said success. So I don't want my daughter living a life that's not successful. And I think he started to view success differently through Greg, as he did have a dream. He did have a vision, because of the last part of the movie where he comes back, you could just tell all kind of the barriers were down. And again, I feel
that's fair.
I
so maybe
feel
there was
bad talking about this for people that haven't seen the movie, because I don't want to, again, any spoilers. But I think the mother even resigned to the idea that I'm not going to stand in the way of this, because there is definitely something here I don't understand, and my eyes see something different than what I'm seeing here in front of me. So the possibilities. If you looked at somebody and said, okay, they don't have anything really going for them, but man, they're driven. And man, there's something about them that tenacity is never going to give up. And so I think they started to see that in him and kind of relinquished control of the idea that, okay.
Well, I think I didn't get all of that. Although hearing you speak it, I think, okay, I can see how you got there.
And that developed through the movie because he got a car.
Fair enough. So maybe I just didn't feel that the same way that you felt it, because you've lived kind of some of that experience yourself personally with you and your dad, and so I lived a different version of that, and so it was anyway that. It's a light criticism for me. I just think that we took a big jump there and we didn't really develop why. But that wasn't really a central focus of the movie either. So that's not necessarily a fair criticism. But I didn't like that.
I think it's also just a great analogy of people come to Christ how? Not by telling them what you're going to do, by showing them. And so it was that grace and that patience and that tenacity of loving, Kathy loving on her dad, saying it's not just for hippies. It's not just you don't understand, Dad. It's not the drugs. It's not all of these things. I've tried all these things and that's not the answer. I just wish that you could see it too. And so her constant staying course and being passionate about the things that he didn't understand led him to, and him realizing that those were not bad things. She wasn't doing illegal things. That said, hey, maybe there is more to this.
So we took the whole family to see it twice, actually. Our youngest is 12. Our oldest he's a man now, so not a big deal. But do you think this is a movie for all ages of a family? I'll put you on the spot with that question.
I do.
You do? Because I've kind of wrestled with that a little bit. Meaning,
no, I do.
Like, I've been an advocate. I've talked positively about it, but I'll stop short at saying, "Oh, you should take your whole family to see this." I don't know, because we as a family are rarely open. We talk about a lot of stuff that probably most people don't. So there is a lot of like innuendo, not innuendo, like they talk about previous sinful lives and drugs and sex as an example, and so. I don't know. Is that too much for younger kids to? Because in one of the, as an example, I'll give you an example. In one of the scenes, they're at that concert. Remember, Greg and his it wasn't his wife, it's Connie. Were at the concert before they became Christians. They were at the Janis Joplin, the Happening or whatever it was called, and they drop all that acid from the airplane, and they all sitting around dropping acid. Remember? So that's explicit drug use.
Mid-40-year-old woman. I didn't even know that was acid.
What did you think they were doing?
I thought they were pamphlets. I'm not even joking.
But they even show like their mind being like,
I know,
woo!
But I thought that was just
they even shows them taking it.
No, I didn't even. I've seen it 3 times and I didn't know that.
Are you serious?
I'm 100% serious.
I don't even know what to do with that right now.
Well, just to go to show you, I think that I think the movie is for all ages, yes, but I think that the movie also should elicit conversation. So,
yeah, because there was some uncomfortable stuff with Greg and his mom. Like leaving dad, and she was always trying to pick up dudes and she was a drunkard, and so like there's some things in there that are, even though they're short scenes to tell a bigger story, that maybe I don't know if I'm like, oh yeah, my 6-year-old needs to go watch it. I don't know. So like I think it's a really good movie. I'm a big advocate of it. I like the production. I like the story. The characters involved, if you actually do some research on those 3 men specifically, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of rabbit holes you can run down with them, good and bad, for the record. But the
actors or the people they portrayed?
The people they portrayed.
Okay.
The real Lonnie Frisbee is a very controversial
the main
person.
actor in there became a Christian through the movie.
Who?
I can't remember his name. Lonnie. Not Lonnie, I'm sorry. Greg.
Oh, really?
I think so.
I didn't know that. Okay, well, if that's the case...
Don't quote me.
I'm not going to quote you on it, but I didn't know that if that's the case.
But yeah, so he was like from the Kissing Booth, like different Netflix series. And
okay.
so our youngest daughter was really excited because she knew him through that.
See, I didn't know.
And then she started following his Instagram account, and she's like, man, he's really like talking about Christianity.
This is the guy that played Greg.
Yeah.
Okay.
Talking about Christianity and loving Jesus.
Because the guy that plays Lonnie Frisbee is the guy who plays Jesus from Chosen.
So I spoke that wrong, but yes. So I don't know. I have to, again, don't quote me on that. But
well, anyway, my point being,
how can it not impact your life?
For sure. I agree with that.
I mean, I saw something behind the scenes. This kind of goes into another little section, but of the producers of Jesus Revolution, about how they were filming, and then all of a sudden they noticed some of the extras that had gone. And they needed them to come back, and they see over on the side.
Yeah, Greg, the real Greg Laurie was baptizing.
Because people were making decisions for Christ on set.
Yeah.
And he said, how powerful is it that you are filming and producing a movie about the revolution that took place, but a revolution is happening in that production, in that moment.
Well, where I was going with that, I was just slightly hesitant because there is some stuff that I may not advocate for younger kids, although I think it does elicit necessary conversation.
Well, I think we do live in a very broken world, and they're probably going to see worse things on devices. And
I know,
so,
but it's our job to protect us as much as we can from those things. So
from our lens, we've been very open with our kids since they were very little. We are
it works
in
for
the
us.
world, but not of the world. And so we have to make sure that we're having those conversations with our kids to help give them knowledge to where we stand and why we stand the way we stand. And so that way they can have those conversations. Again, be the gauge of that as a parent.
So the last thing I want to talk about is how Christians suck.
We all suck.
That was why I lead it. I want to see your face when I said it. Because
they can be the most hurtful.
They can. And here's why I'm going to say this. We've experienced that directly. But people in the Christian circles tend to really be critical of their own folks. Like, it's crazy. And so, like, I just have noticed people, like, they want to tear apart the chosen, which is a little bit different. I understand why, because that's actually representing the Gospels and representing Jesus. In this situation, I've seen some criticism. I've read and watched criticism about this because of the characters involved, or you're including all this non-Jesus stuff in a movie that's about a Jesus revolution. So there's been a lot of criticism out there that is maybe in some people's minds very warranted, in other people's minds not so warranted. So I guess what I wanted to touch on is the criticism from the Christian conservative base about that whole Jesus movement to begin with is pretty what's the right word? Pretty well known. Meaning, there's we'll use your mom as an example. Our own family, when we moved to KC for what, I don't know, we went to a Vineyard Church here in Kansas City for probably 6 or 7 years. I don't even remember how long it was. We had friends that went there, and so we started going to a group with them. That's how we got involved. And actually met a lot of great people that we're still friends with to today. But we started having kiddos, and that church that happened to be 25 miles away. It's easy to stop going to a church that's 25 miles away when you have brand new kiddos. But we were going to a Vineyard Church. That's why I knew about Lonnie Frisbee, at least a little bit. But I remember your Baptist family being concerned, and I'm just kind of say that lightly, I'm not being critical. Just be careful. I think that's what was said. About going to a Vineyard Church because of some of the things that they knew about the people or how the movement started, and those are important things. So to keep in context, because I am a big believer I think it is my job as a father, as a husband, to be protective and be discerning about false teachings and things like that. So I think those are real. I don't want to minimize that. But on the flip side, I think there's so much about Jesus that we have no real understanding about how that dude works and uses people, flawed people, uses imperfect movies to do things that so there's been a lot of criticism out there in general. How do you feel about that?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on things that you just said that my brain is now scrolling.
You're welcome.
In all different directions, but as followers, we're held to accountability. I think that's important. Mm-hmm. I think when we speak something, that we need to speak truth, it needs to be scriptural truth, and there's accountability in the Christian community, and very, very necessary and very biblical. However, I think we can start splitting hairs with that. So I believe in this particular movie, there's a lot of imperfections there. There's a lot of past sin. There's a lot of
they're icky. There's a lot of icky because people are
like
icky.
You said, is that a feel good movie? I'll kind of go back to that if you remind me. But isn't that the world that we live in?
Yeah,
and I think
sure.
How do we evangelize to people that we put ourselves above? And so, and now we're talking about from Christian to Christian. Okay?
Yeah, in this specific example, what I asked about, because I agree with you, it is not our job as Christians to judge non-Christians.
But from Christian sister to Christian sister, Christian brother to Christian brother, there is a sense of holding accountability and saying, hey, let me, iron sharpens iron. So we got to make sure that we're speaking the truth and not allowing false teaching.
Yeah.
So that can kind of be hard water to navigate, but it always goes back to scripture. And so does God use imperfect people to do powerful miracles? All through the Bible it did. He did. You can go back to the Noah day. After Noah stepped off the boat, he made some bad decisions. But that doesn't mean that wasn't used by God. That doesn't mean that Noah was an amazing man. Noah was an amazing man because he was spirit-led.
Yeah, and I think that's
He's a flawed human.
The root message of this movie is exactly that. So God used some really jacked up people, because we're all jacked up, right? But specifically, he used some jacked up people, whether it be Chuck and his closed-minded, law-based approach, or Lonnie and his crazy evangelical spirit-filled focus, or Greg and his past drug use and all, you know what I mean? So they're definitely, these are people that are flawed, were flawed, right? And through those flawed people, and a massive movement that spread across the globe, actually, took place in the late 60s and 70s. And I think that's the message.
Yeah, and don't you think that God intended to work through people with messes? So
Sure.
that a way we can use our message for his message. Our messes for his message.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
That's a lot to say. But it's true. I mean, God spoke in parables all through the Bible. And so he wants us to share our testimony. He wants us to share our struggle so that way he can be glorified. That doesn't mean that the sin is glorified. It means that he's glorified. And so when we're walking through something, that may not be the moment to share it. It's like when you've, our pastor said this before, like, I will preach on a message, not necessarily when I'm walking through it, but when I've overcome it.
Yeah.
And so when you have clarity on it and the Holy Spirit allows you to be able to see clarity on it and give glorification back to God, you don't glorify the sin, you glorify the redemptiveness of it.
Correct. The story of redemption. And that's, so I think too, and this is back to my root question, I think the criticisms, while they have water to them, some of them that I've read, the premise of the movie is there. And I think the meat of the movie is there. And this is what I've said to people who have asked me, and I said at the very beginning of this podcast, which was, I've never watched a movie that mixed Christian warm fuzzy with real dirty, sticky life.
So going back to, was it a feel-good movie? And for me, even though it had hurtful moments or where it's scraping away that scar that you have got that scab over that you thought was healed, now you're like crying in the movie theater and you're like, oh, I thought I dealt with that. Okay, clearly I haven't dealt with that. It was a feel-good movie because I was able to walk away with hope.
Yeah.
It wasn't this message of everything is perfect and if you're not living this life, we are very imperfect, all of us. Some of us have hidden things. Some of us have public things. Some of us have, we all pay a price for the things that we decide to do. The choices that we make, we get to make those choices because of free will. We tell our kids this all the time. You get to a certain age, guess what? You're going to be able to make your own choices. Mom and dad can't bail you out, right? So God allows you, gives you free will to make your own choices. But that also means there's accountability for those choices. And you can choose your choice.
Choose your choice.
But you can't always choose the outcome. And so you're going to have to pay for the wages of sin is death. So you're going to have to pay for the things that you do in life. The choices that you make are going to have consequences. But that does not mean that there can't be redemption through that process of even sometimes those consequences that you're paying.
Yeah, and I think that was, so for me, I'm a high recommend on the movie. It is not a warm fuzzy feel good all the way through. There's a lot of stickiness, and you do walk out feeling like
there's hope.
Was that good? Was that not good? Like, I'm not sure. Like, it was, and I agree with that feeling because the story ends with Chuck giving or helping Greg start his own church, which Harvest Church. Yeah. Became one of the largest churches in the United States.
It's a constant death and rebirth, and rebirth.
So I think the message, the general premise of the movie, and again, this isn't the Bible. So I think this is what gets me starts getting me worked up. Like when people are overly critical, like it's like we're always finding reasons to be critical. Anytime someone tries to do something good, we're trying to put out a movie to spread a good message about the gospel of Christ and how it spread and the redemptive nature of that story, and then people just want to tear it down. And it just drives me nuts. And Christians are the worst against other Christians. It really, I mean, this happens
I think they feel like they have a flag to plant to say, hey, we have to do better. And there is a room and, there's a time and place for that. But when we're talking about evangelism and bringing people into the movie theater and giving them good things like to meditate and think about, changing their perspective, that they can sit and eat popcorn and drink a soda and eat their candy and watch something about the revolution of Christ in people's lives. It may not be perfect, but it's definitely a seed that's planted that can be harvested, if not harvested in that moment. I
agree. And I thought the movie was fabulous. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. It does leave you walking out with a little bit of hope, but also this it's a cautiously introspective, questioning hope. Like it's not this warm fuzzy like, oh, I just feel so good. No, it's like deeper.
Let's be the change.
Yes,
let's do this.
And I thought they just did a really good job of mixing that into not this cheesy version of Jesus that we've been fed for a long time without high production and good income put behind it, I guess is kind of the point you were making. I thought they did it. This is one of the better movies I've seen. if not the best,
full of hope
in its arena.
I think you said that right. It's you walk out not cheesy like, oh, that felt good. No. You're on mission. Like, I left there thinking, what can I do in my own community? What can I do with the platform that God's blessed me with? Because it's all Him. What can I do to share the gospel more? What can I do to be the hope in other people's lives more? And I think, again, that resonating thing, common denominator in the movie, to me, was just to show people to Christ, not tell them. Not necessarily tell them. Those words definitely come. But showing up and being the change, showing up and pointing the way.
Just being willing to be used.
Be willing to be used. Be willing to be put in situations that you wouldn't normally have been willing to do before. And waking up and saying yes to God.
Yeah, because I think one of the most powerful, I could have used this one of the more powerful scenes in the movie, if you remember, is one night Greg is woken up and Lonnie is out back by a fire and he's like just in pain praying, and he's like, just don't abandon me, use me. Like, so, like, it was that moment where Greg got to see Lonnie in his true, like, there was nobody around. It was truly Lonnie crying out to God, don't abandon me, keep using me, I want to be the vessel. And I think that was it was short, but a powerful scene of Lonnie was way flawed, right? And he got into too much of the almighty me, making stuff about him. But you could see that his genuine heart was trying to be used, making himself available for use. Anyway, I thought that was a really good scene too.
But always be open to the idea that maybe God is going to use you in this season like He hasn't used you before. So just because Lonnie was on a platform may not be the next season of his life.
Yeah, fair enough.
And so I think we all have to be mindful of that, because it does sometimes become all about me, self-serving.
And one more thing I'm going to bring up, and then we're going to end this, is I did really like the point at the end, towards the end of the movie. It was the end of the movie, actually, where Chuck comes back to Greg, and because there was a point in the movie where they were trying to kind of push Lonnie out, and they wanted Lonnie to go do this Bible study.
And Greg stood up.
And Greg stood up, like, I'll do it.
I've been called.
I've been called. So Greg goes and does it, and he does it really well. Mm-hmm. But it was like this really old. It gives the impression that it was Catholic. So I'm not sure how this worked out, but because the dude was wearing a cloth.
Yeah.
But anyway, there was a scene come back later where they basically fired Greg. They didn't fire him. They just didn't keep him on.
They didn't have a position for him anymore.
Yeah, and Chuck didn't stand up for him. This old staunch preacher's like, nah, it's just not the right fit. And Greg was doing like a fabulous job by most standards, right? At the end of the movie, I really liked that Chuck came back and said, you know what? I should have stood up for you, and I didn't, and I was wrong, and I apologize. I really liked that, because I think so few times in our lives do we just own it. We screw up all the time. It means so much to me, and I think you too, like when people just own it. Like, I know I've done 1,000 things, right, to hurt people or say mean things or wronged, whatever, but just own it. We say that to our kids all the time, and I really liked that scene. It was very subtle, very small, but he was like, you know what, I should have stood up for you and I didn't, and I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Those are like magical healing words, aren't they? Right. Just those simple words. I really like that part of it. I meant to mention that earlier.
Yeah, that was really powerful. Very good.
So, our summary. Jesus, Revolution, good flick. Not perfect. No. We're not even trying to pretend that it's perfect.
It's not the Bible.
But it's one of the best, if not the best, pieces of entertainment centered around Christ that I've watched, and our whole family's watched it multiple times. I'm a big fan of it.
Yep, 100% agree.
All right. Tune in next time. Do we know what we're talking about on the next episode yet?
We do not. But hey, before we leave here, if you've seen it, then comment below. What was your favorite?
Oh, yeah. I would like to know. That is good. I would like to know what stood out to most of you who've seen the movie. What stood out to you as something that was either good or bad? Yeah. Like, if you didn't agree with it, you thought it was trashy. I'd like to hear why. Like, I'm an inquisitive guy. I thought this was good. I didn't think it was perfect. But I do like to hear the opposing viewpoints. Yep. But I also like to hear when you agree. Yeah. And remember, if you like this podcast, subscribe, because we're going to keep doing them. Push that subscribe button and share it with somebody that might like it as well. Yes. All right? All right. Episode 7, Failing Our Way Forward. Jesus Revolution is done.